This woman, as the librettist, had the daunting task of taking a 7,000-year-old epic tale and in 18 months transforming it into an opera. We are speaking with Diana Farrell about Gilgamesh, the opera. 18 months. How'd you pull this off?
Well, I don't sleep.
Yeah.
And I have ADHD, and so I just get very hyper focused on things. uh, no, it's a matter of, I think, enthusiasm and having the uh, luxury of being able to focus on something so big and just whittling it down to small everyday details, right? How to eat the elephant, one bite at a time.
Right. We want to make sure you still recognize your children at this point, Diana.
Yes, they've gotten older. My husband says that they're doing well. Uh, and actually, it's been fun because well, especially my son, he's 9 years old. He's been, my sidekick throughout this. So he loves listening to the music and he loves the story. And he actually read through not formal translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh, but of my libretto.
Hmm.
Um, and he said he loved it. It was so cool. It was like superheroes. And the only question he had for me was, what does consummation mean? I said, we'll talk about that when you're older. But
So,
it's a good story. What can I say?
so in 18 months, we went from concept of turning the Epic of Gilgamesh or Gilgamesh, whichever, if you want to use the
Right.
actual pronunciation of it, to an
Hmm.
opera that's going to have its world premiere at the Cerritos Center for the Performing Arts. Uh, you and I are both ethnic Assyrians, so
Mhm.
it has a special place in our own hearts and our own ethnic identities into this opera. When you get the call from the Assyrian Arts Institute and go, all right, we're doing this. By the way, you have a year and a half, go. And you have 7,000 years of tradition to build off from
Right.
the original Sumerian to now make it happen. Take us through meeting Nora, Bet Yosef, and how this all came about.
Well, so I need to, I don't, you're giving me way too much credit.
Yeah.
So this is about 3 years in the making. And when you're, conceptualizing a mammoth beast of a production like this, of course, it's easy to get excited and imagine what the end result will be. And then the hardest part, I think, is taking the first step. So January 1st, 2023 was technically the beginning of my contract. I'd been speaking with Nora for a few months, and truly the way we found each other was a little bit predestined as well, I would call it. I had been doing research during COVID on a lullaby that's been in my family for over 100 years, back to my, great grandmothers and aunts and everybody in Harput, Turkey, and looking for the actual translation of that lullaby. And so in 2020 and 2021, I was reaching out to anyone and everyone across the globe who might be able to help me with transliterations of recordings of this lullaby that I have from my great aunt and my mother and myself. And in that process, I must have at some point reached out to the Assyrian Arts Institute, sent this information asking for any help, you know, finding a resource, finding a person or anything, right, that might point me in the right direction. And I will say that, side note, I did find all the information I needed on that, but it was just within the last year. So that was like an 8-year project on its own, right? More than that, right? I've known this song my whole life. But anyway, so when Nora reached out to me about this project, it was because I had at some point entered her orbit, and she gone and looked at my credentials. Who is this person asking these weird questions? And she saw that I was an opera producer and singer and director and librettist, and she sent me a very simple email, and all it said was, "Are you Assyrian?" And I kind of went, "Yeah, who's asking? Yes, may I help you?" And we immediately got on a phone call, and she was telling me about this grand vision and dream that she's had for 15 years, that she'd gone down the road many times in the past with other collaborators and creators, just seeing if this was possible. And I told her it sounded absolutely thrilling and something I'd love to help her bring to life. And so January 1st, we sat down with a couple other folks who were part of the project and started looking at the raw materials, right? What do we have to work with? And the answer was simply too much, right? That's a lot of story, a lot of years, and a lot of research done by people who are far more intelligent than I will ever be. Um, and I'm sorry, this is a super long story. I will
No,
never stop
it's worth
talking.
it because listen, the original story
So,
is
do you need to
7,000 years
breathe
in the
before I
making.
continue?
So,
Exactly. All right. So we can take 7 minutes. Yeah. But so I told her that for me, my memory, right? My core memory of this tale, this story, these characters. The first thing that came to mind from my, reading it, back in high school, um, was that it was a story about legacy. And the first thing I said to her was, I think this is a really important story for the Assyrian Arts Institute, of all places, to produce, because the lesson that we learn, or that I always took away from Gilgamesh, is the idea that if you do good deeds, your legacy will live on forever. And the seeds that you plant, right, those are the blooms that come long after you're gone. And I said, this is the perfect story for the Assyrian Arts Institute to share, because as a people, as a stateless nation in diaspora, the Assyrian people have always relied upon one another to do the right thing and to help each other out and to um, generously keep the culture alive. And I think that the story of Gilgamesh is the map, really, right, for the rest of us. And so I thought it was just the perfect story. I said, let's just start there. There are so many beautiful lessons and ideas in the story. Let's pick our focal point and let's make it legacy. And so pouring back through these stories using that very focused lens made this the undertaking much more realistic, right? We cannot possibly retell every story from every nuanced point of view, but we can pick the one that we feel is meaningful to us personally, maybe us as a community, not that I speak for a whole community by any means, and we can use that as our vessel to bring this story to the stage. So that was the first challenge, but that focus and that mission really was a very important part of what Nora tries to do with the Assyrian Arts Institute. And so it was kind of simple afterward to use that as the means by which we, surgically extract the moments that we want to use from the, the 11 and a half tablets that we do know of, right? And how do they focus in on that purpose?
and when you're presented with this concept, do you instantly start, once you get the green light and go, all right, we're going with the legacy foundation of the story and the people and the customs and cultures. Do you start putting a team together in your mind ahead of time, or do you start now re-examining, the translations that we have and trying to create the narrative from it? Because this is not a one-to-one scale of 11 tablets.
No. And so so no team yet. In any, in the history of opera, when you think of operas, you often associate them with the composer who wrote it. But the composer had source material as well, right? Whether it was somebody living that they actually worked with, a playwright, or whether it was a novel, or something, the music comes after the words. And so my first step, really, right, was to kind of reacquaint myself with some of the basic translations. Basic is a strong word, but from Andrew George and Stephen Mitchell, and kind of the old war horses out there for English translations. Because, spoiler alert, I do not read cuneiform or Akkadian. So I was already relying on giants that had come before me, right? And it is very important to know that as a person who tells stories through theater, that this was never meant to be an academic dissertation or a projection of what was on the tablets directly onto stage. There is a lot of art that happens in between. And so going through the facts of the story without kind of emotional attachment was the first step to creating a chronological plan to guide us through all of these really well-known worlds and scenes within the story, which we can get into a little bit later if you want. But and then connecting those dots with the perspective of one singular mind, right? This is one man experiencing all of these episodes in his life. And then we use the emotional guide of what brings us from one experience into the next. What baggage did we carry with us from this tragedy into our next encounter? And really just fleshing it out in the most human way possible, because for me, that's how an audience is going to follow a story that is so gargantuan, is from their own personal experience. How do they recall their own lives, right? That's really what's happening in the Epic of Gilgamesh here, is he's recounting, or we are along for the ride as we read the story of this king's life and all the things that come together to lead him to what we decided was this understanding that legacy is the greater achievement over immortality.
And the translation into the 2/3 God, 1/3 man aspect, and the mysticism and the Anunnaki and the dealing with Ishtar and Enkidu and all these other characters coming into it. How do you work that around in the sequences in making it fit for stage from the mind's eye? Because we haven't even seen this on film yet.
Right. So I'm going to ask you to do some imagining with me. And the scariest part about imagining anything, right, is that what you see in your head and what I see in my head are probably a little different. So we have to get there by making sure our purpose and our goal is the same. So one of the early concepts that we ran with was this idea of a stargate, right? And in Assyrian culture, we all think, Battlestar Galactica, right? Some big gyrosphere thing that, transports us with a flashing blue light into a new universe. So that concept itself, not the physical or the visual kind of idea that we all might have today, but the idea that there is some sort of a portal between worlds and existence and time, is a very old Assyrian storytelling convention. It is a tool that we use to understand the idea of moving between places, physical or otherwise. And so we thought, okay, we can absolutely utilize this as a vehicle to incorporate the appearance or disappearance of godly otherworldly creatures, beasts of the forest, down to just the most basic human-on-human interaction with citizens of Uruk. And so we chose the concept of the Assyrian reliefs that still exist today to be our Stargate. And so physically on stage, when singers appear as gods and goddesses, we are trying to demonstrate recording their stories through history, whether it's through cuneiform tablets or through these carved reliefs, and having those come to life or transform into the physical actors and singers and dancers that we see on stage. So that's the first kind of theatrical convention that we said, if we establish this and we make the rules of our universe that we're creating for this 2-hour window very clear, then we can use it throughout the rest of the production without continual explanation. So that's kind of the first rule, is what are the, the rules of your universe. We are certainly not the first creators to do this, right? Star Wars does it, the Marvel universe does it. If you know the rules, you can get away with a lot of stuff, right? So we had to create our rules for our depiction. And the second is, because I do like to kind of bring it back to that more human element so often, right? Is that as I was writing for these gods and goddesses, the Anunnaki, I often think about the voices in our head, those maybe it's our conscience, maybe it's this a divine inclination bestowed upon you, whatever it might be for you, however you interpret those changes of heart, or those kind of foot-stopping changes in your life, right? Those things that stop and make you think, whatever that impetus is. That's what I personally was using to understand this 2/3 God, 1/3 man, this physical creature's interaction with the celestial world, with these Anunnaki. We talk about characters like Tiamat and Apsu, who are the original, most primordial gods. Would they have even been given human form? Perhaps not. And then we have characters like Ishtar and Ea, who are very clearly depicted in human bodies. Maybe they have talons or wings, but mostly human bodies. And so using these characters and thinking about them and their influence on Gilgamesh's actions and thoughts, I really think of them all as part of Gilgamesh's conscience. That's a very heady statement, but for the kind of realists in the room, maybe not the theologians in the room, these interactions that he has with each of the Anunnaki are those moments in his life where he maybe sees something from a different viewpoint for a change, or maybe he explains away the bad fortune or the bad luck happening in his life. And we all do this on a pretty regular basis, right? Like, oh, that little voice in my head is telling me I shouldn't open this door, or don't press the red button. I'm not going to do it. Something's telling me not to. Whatever that instinct is, I really wanted those characters to be a different aspect of Gilgamesh's psyche. And so we utilize them in these turning point moments in his life to help direct the story, because it's the moment where he comes up with an idea, or he makes a change, or he bemoans his fate. And so, yes, we are still having them on stage as beautiful, costumed, flowing, epic creatures, people or otherwise. But there's a human element to it, right? Perhaps they are more fable than fact, and they are the characters that Gilgamesh creates to explain his thoughts and feelings. I told you I talk a lot.
It's good because we're in on it. Yeah. And then take us through how you find, so you're commissioned this, you've now built the foundation of
Right.
what we're going for and how we're going to, well, we haven't even gotten to how we're going to achieve it, but
I
the
know.
foundation
I
in the
know.
storytelling and where we're going to get it.
Right.
Now, how do you put the team together? I mean, you have
Right.
Derek Sky as your composer, and where
Mhm.
did you find Derek, and how did Derek get pulled into the project?
So the libretto itself was completed about a year and change after my official first day, right? So beginning of January 2024, or maybe it was even earlier, it might have been in October beforehand, we put out a commissioning announcement and we shared it through um, local, I shouldn't say local, but because it's social media, right? Through cultural outlets and Assyrian organizations and kind of social groups through those channels so that we could make sure people were aware of what was going on. But we also shared it through professional organizations like Opera America and the American Composers Forum, because if you don't know already, composing an opera is very different than a singer-songwriter might do on a guitar with one voice, right? There's just so many pieces to this puzzle, and it is often seen as the epitome of compositional achievement. Um, Somebody who has a knack for a beautiful melody, that's very important. But there's just like cinematic film scoring, right? There's so much storytelling that is required for the rest of that 2 hour event beyond just beautiful songs. So when we put out the commission, um, it was pretty open ended, but we had a few specific requirements. And that was that we wanted to hear published music because most people, especially on the timeline we have, should not make a grand opera their first go round. um, and we had we wanted to hear their voice as a composer, but we also provided samples of traditional Assyrian music that we said we want to hear your take on it. If you had to orchestrate this melody, and orchestrating is basically a fancy word for saying pick all the instruments, pick the sounds, pick the style. If you had to orchestrate this traditional melody, how would you do it? We had 82 applicants internationally for this position. We had a team of about, I think there were about 9 of us, and I think 6 of us were Assyrian. I might be off by one number on either side of those figures, but who sit and listen to all of these applicants come through. And there were, especially, one of the pieces we had folks orchestrate was like oh God, I'm going to forget the name of it. It was just like typical Linda George tune, like something that people who grew up in the culture or going to cousins' weddings, like we've all heard it. And we heard the most unbelievable, in a good way, versions of that song. Some sounded like they were straight out of Disneyland. Some of them sounded like they were written for a mariachi group. Some of them, it was just flavors from all over the place. But part of the purpose of this search was to find somebody who can spend the time to understand and translate the essence of the Assyrian sound, right? We don't want a grand departure from what we know. We want to elevate traditional and folkloric sounds that are authentic to the Assyrian culture. And so it was a long process. I would say it was probably 6 or 7 months in total. And the choice of Derek, I would say that, at the beginning would have surprised us. Derek is a very well-known musician and composer. And the thing about his music that is so different is that he's really an ethnomusicologist and not just a composer. So he grew up studying and immersing himself in world music, a lot of Arabic maqam, a lot of Indian Radif music. I hope I said that right. West African drumming, really like the full gamut. Plus, every typical Western classical educational thing that we get in the school systems. And so his musical vocabulary was so vast compared to a lot of the people that we spoke with, that we all felt super confident in his ability to not just immerse himself and learn what makes Assyrian music sound different than Turkish music, what makes Assyrian music sound different than Persian music, right? And it's very subtle if you don't know the difference, but it's also something that has not been actively written down that often. So he was chosen because as he demonstrated, right, we could really trust him to listen when people said, "Ooh, that's really cool, but that's not it." And without getting the ego involved, because his ultimate goal was to really honor and share this flavor of sound that was really unique, and then build upon it so that it's not just your typical synthesizer music that you might hear at a wedding or out at a festival, but that we elevate the sound for the first time and put it in an artistic presentation meant for a concert hall, which is something that does not happen with all traditional or folk music, or even church music, right? And so it was a unique challenge, and Derek kind of proved again and again that even if he didn't do something the first time that everyone was like, "Yes, you got it, it's Assyrian, you're amazing," that he was willing to step back, analyze. And after he signed on to the project in, I want to say it was April 2024, he said, "The first thing I need is 1 year of studying, right? I'm not just going to come in and write what I want to write. I need to learn and work with practitioners and musicians and academics who understand very specifically Assyrian maqams, traditions, ornamentation, instruments." And so that was where his journey began. While he was off studying with, Dr. Isada and a lot of her musical connections around the globe, that's when I started piecing together the rest of the production team. So now I'm going into a whole different topic, so feel free to cut me off.
Sorry.
But so it was a really interesting year because Derek he's a very prolific composer. He had many other commissions worldwide that were in process. So he also knew taking on something of this magnitude was not something he could do while he had all these other projects in the air. So that year of study time also gave him time to wrap up prior projects so that when the time came, he could just devote himself to Gilgamesh. And it was really a fun time because we got to know each other better as creative people. Because while he's off learning things, he'd be, texting me videos like, "This beat is so hot. This is amazing." And it's, these old YouTube videos of, people dancing out at a festival in Iraq from, the 1980s that somebody uploaded from VHS and put on YouTube. And like, I'm sending him videos of choreographers and things like that. And we're just kind of brain dumping, right? All of the aesthetic ideas that speak to us as far as how we're going to tell our story, along with simultaneously, right? Everything happens all at the same time, nonstop, with Nora and Eve Sada sharing their favorite traditional recordings, songs, costuming ideas, right? When it comes to just the visuals of things, their favorite reliefs, their favorite depictions of certain gods and goddesses, writing and poetry and analysis of certain characters and parts of the story. So it was kind of an amazing little free-for-all for about 9 months while everybody is gathering the examples, right, of what speaks to them, but turning it over to find out what is unique to us and to this project. So it's, I mean, I guess ultimately it seems like there's so much work to be done, and there is, but it's really about great teamwork and collaboration, not getting married to any one idea before everybody else is exposed to it, and understanding that after our little team of 4 people, right, considered and molded over, that we then wanted to send out what our consensus was, right, on something that we all agreed with, send it out to our other cultural advisors and say, hey, is this too far away from a traditional Assyrian line dance? Is this have too much flavor of a Persian maqam in it, right? Is it too ornamented? Does it sound more Armenian than it sounds Assyrian? So it was a lot of teamwork that started with the 4 of us and then kind of grouped out as we added on practitioners, designers, choreographers, and scholars, and I mean, I guess also practitioners, right, on that side too. People who are experts in the cultural subject matter, not just the technical side of putting it on stage. Please stop me. Please give me a direction, because I'm just going to keep going forever
No,
and ever and
I'm
ever.
enthralled with this, but before we get into that aspect of it, librettist, how is this different than a
Right.
lyricist? And
Yes.
how do we find the balance in explaining the two and describing the two? Because we
Good
want to
question.
have you actually have the title that you deserve instead of somebody that goes, "Oh, she just wrote the lyrics," and it's like, "No, no, no, there's far more to it than that."
Well, thank you. Yes. So a librettist uh, does just a fancy Italian word for the person who writes the words. That's all it means. But beyond the words that you hear being sung, they are also the person who crafts the visual storytelling elements even before there are designers involved. Um, when you sit down to see, Lord help you if you do ever, but if you sit down to watch, a 5-hour Wagner opera, 5 hours, right? That is intense. But if you go look at the libretto, it's maybe like 19 pages, right? It takes a lot of time to sing something compared to speaking it. And so, as a librettist, the story starts, for me at least, my process is I just got to dump it all out of my head. And there's usually way too much. There's so many details. As you can tell, I love to talk and I love words. And then the discipline is to go back and whittle away, because you want to figure out, what is your point? Why are you bothering to have somebody say something at all? And what is the heart of the matter? How can you say it most efficiently, or hopefully most beautifully as well, right? Um, so that's the first step. You also have to make sure that if there's visual storytelling, that is included in the libretto, in the script itself that you're writing, because those words that you're using to describe maybe a visual change or a physical act, those words are what the composer uses to craft the oral storytelling. And if I were to just say, the characters of Enkidu and Shamhat do a sexy dance here, um, yeah, that could work, and he'd probably write something cool. But if we have a very specific vision of that storytelling, we want to make sure that we give the composer as much direction as possible, right? Are they uh, encountering each other for the first time? Is it a beautiful physical act? Is it a consensual thing? Is it respectful, or is it brazen and violent? Or these details that you don't hear people speak about on stage necessarily are an important part of the character development and the storytelling. And so we need to make sure that uh, the depictions of every character and their actions are consistent with the words that they speak or sing. throughout the production. So as the librettist, the idea is conceptual and literal from start to stop. Create those conventions I spoke about earlier, make sure we stick to them, and then find the places where after everybody reads through and says, nope, too long, get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this, can go back with a fresh set of eyes and say, okay, you're right. It's much better without this jazz, right? I'm not offended. It's not ego, it's storytelling. But they can also go back and say, okay, but you made me get rid of this, and now this doesn't make sense anymore. We left out a very important key storytelling element, and kind of being able to revisit the story over and over again with fresh eyes.
And as this is coming together, and we're heading into rehearsals very soon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are only we're about a month and a half away, March 28th, and a second showing on the 29th. So we got two showings at the Cerritos Center for the Performing Arts, world premiere. Cerritos is a beautiful venue. I go there all the time. I cover a lot of concerts there. And when I found out it was going to be there, I was so excited because I was like, finally, it's only 20 minutes from my house. I don't have to go so far away.
That's why we chose it.
Is
That's
that really
why, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. Gas is almost $5 a gallon again.
Exactly.
Like you're saving me a lot of hassle. I was like, if it was North Hollywood, I would be like, do I really want to go to LA for these people?
Yes, no, you do. You want to come from all over. Please, please. It's worth it, I swear.
No, I'm talking about my own.
There's a hotel across the street. Yeah, I know.
Everybody else, yes, please come internationally.
Yes, please.
From Peru to Zimbabwe to Madagascar, everybody come over.
Anything in
I'm
between.
Just lazy. How did Cerritos become the identifier home? I know Nora lives in Northern California. You and I are both in Southern California. It's a beautiful venue. They can transform it from an intimate 400 setting to nearly 1,800 seats.
Yeah.
And the multiple configurations. And I've been there when they've converted the theater and watched them do it. I was just in awe of it. That 1 minute
it's a
video
dance.
that oh yeah.
Yeah.
They have a 1 minute video to show you like it's sped up and the
4 different configurations or something.
But to actually see them do it is amazing. When
they said it's like an 8-hour process, and it's just like, down the checklist of slow moving objects and one at a time. And, it's the longest Rube Goldberg machine you've ever seen.
Oh yeah. And I was the goof that sat there for 2 hours going, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Yeah. When you decide on a location and then you're trying to make sure the dates are there, and Jeff at Cerritos is always phenomenal to work with.
Yeah.
When you Jeff Thielke, we got to give Jeff his flowers as well, as the kids say.
He's been very helpful, very patient, and very supportive, because the theater, of course, is going through the theater is city owned. It's not a theatrical union or anything like that, and it's kind of one of the most beautiful civic spaces I've ever seen. For it to not be a private commercialized business on its own is kind of unbelievable. But they've been going through a huge overhaul in staff because it's a city, and a lot of those retirements lined up because that place opened up 30 years ago in the 90s, and there's a lot of people hitting that retirement age all at the same time. So it's been kind of incredible, because we would start the process, like with the technical director of the theater, right? We'd start with one person, and then after a year, he'd be like, well, it was nice knowing you. Here's some kid that just got the job, and you're his first gig, and have fun. And it's been probably more stressful on Jeff than anything else has before, because the Cerritos also describes itself as a roadhouse. They are where you're getting a lot of pop artists and kind of pop theatrical acts that are on tour and that are coming all over the place, and they roll up with their trucks and they unload and they build everything in and they do the show 2 or 3 times, and then they unload and they head out to the next city. We are building from scratch, and I don't know if this is even worth sharing at this point, but long ago, when this all started 3 years ago, the idea one of the kind of first people who thought of this plan was Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, who at the time was a trustee of the Kennedy Center. And so the idea initially was to get this at the Kennedy Center. And I kind of said, why not? Let's do it. But the Kennedy Center is not a place where you build a show. You come in with your plans executed and you find out where the pitfalls are and you adjust them appropriately. And so when I was doing my kind of technical investigating, I know just enough about technical theater to be very dangerous. One of the options at the Cerritos Center was honestly like the closest technical aspects and abilities to the Kennedy Center at the time. So we're like, this is actually wonderful because we have this resource that happens to be local to both myself and Derek, the composer, is based in LA. And it's kind of in this little beautiful trifecta where it's easily accessible to Los Angeles County, Orange County, and Riverside County, and even San Diego County. There's almost a straight shot up through Riverside. So we thought this is a kind of equal opportunity performing space because we have a lot of folks excited to come see this production from all over, and not just necessarily in the downtown area. So the space itself, it gave us so many options, and because it's a brand new show and there's a lot of experimentation, not just in the actual storytelling on stage, but in the design concepts as well. We needed options, right? What's our plan A? What's our plan B? Can we even fly in this many floating clay tablets that we're going to have, gods and goddesses floating on and all this kind of stuff? And Cerritos gave us a very, in the grand scheme of things, right? Everything's comparable, but an affordable, but really prestigious venue that we could be really proud of when we had all of our sponsors and donors and audience members come in. And you've been in there, but when you walk in, you would never know that this is just kind of in the suburban town. You walk into this beautiful grand lobby and you're like, oh, this is epic. Wow. So it's the show. So we thought it was a pretty good match, and it gives us great opportunity for when everything is said and done and everything's been taken down at the end. We have our little instruction manual on the show that we've built during the process, so it can get packed up in a truck and it can be taken to another theater somewhere. So that's kind of the idea, is we always wanted this to have a life beyond the premiere, just as Gilgamesh himself, right? And that's part of the legacy, is it was never just supposed to be a one and done thing. This is the world premiere production, almost like a workshop setting, right? Because we're going to find out when we're in there what's possible, what's not possible. Hey, how can we make this part even cooler next time, right? And so we have the opportunity to continue to grow and evolve after this. And that said, this is a fully realized production, right? We're not going to have anybody walking on stage and Gene saying, now imagine this.
It's not a table read.
Right. This is the real deal. Right. This is the real deal. It's only the first iteration, though.
Yeah. Not a table read, not a stage reading. This is the full-blown production. Jeff loves to tease me that I always have to mention this. Free parking, ample parking. Yeah. And he's like, I know how much you love your free and ample parking. I was like, listen, seriously, you can make fun of me all you want.
No free parking garages is a big deal. It's amazing. Yeah.
All right. You don't have to walk far. Yes. It's easy. There is a boatload of parking. You can even park at the Sheraton next door. You can park at the
exactly.
If you end up at the shopping mall,
there's a million little, restaurants, and you can go to Chipotle, or you can hit up a nice 5-star restaurant across the street, whatever your vibe is, which really to me is the essence of modern opera, right? If you have people who are going to walk in their furs and their pearls, and they're going to be ready for a grand night out, and then you're going to have people who love it in a more casual way and should feel comfortable to come and just enjoy themselves and have kind of this epic experience without feeling like they have to put themselves out there just to enjoy it,
Right. With a show like this, it's very ethnically rooted, but it's the foundations of civilization. How do you stay true to that as the writer of this while still making it globalized and for a
Well,
much broader audience, for a heterogeneous audience instead of a homogeneous one?
mhm, well, and ultimately, we have priorities and loyalties, I guess is the only word, and we want to honor the, our own culture and our families and the people who have, made this story part of our lives beforehand. And we want to put that up on a pedestal because a lot of the traditional art forms we're putting on a global stage, right? And we want to do it not just with respect, but we want to make people proud. But at the same time, the majority of our audience is probably not going to be Assyrian people. This is entertainment and storytelling for the masses, and the root of the message in the end. I mentioned before about how in my mind I also want to make sure that these gods and goddesses feel like they're part of Gilgamesh's psyche. By the time we get to the end of the show, the experience, this epic adventure, this hero's tale, ultimately ends with a very human, normal death, right? He closes his eyes and he leaves. And bringing it back to that human element at every step of the way in the storytelling. It was my goal from writing it to now I'm also the artistic director, so I'm also in charge of staging it and, right, and visually putting it on stage. I want to make sure that at any given moment, whether he's making a bad choice or a good choice, the audience can see this character and say, oh, I might have done the same thing. Oh, I would have done that too. I would have made this choice. It's a very human story about feelings getting out of control, about being hurt and offended, about loving somebody, about friendship, about grief, about loss. These are not things that you need to be an immortal being to experience. And so the character of Gilgamesh himself should feel very everyman by the time we get to the end of this life here. Ordinary people in extraordinary situations is kind of the root of all great theater, right? And that doesn't change. And that's why we see so many depictions of Gilgamesh in other cultures for the last thousands of years, really. These stories are relatable on a very human level, far beyond whatever cultural confines it lives in.
I want to ask one thing about the orchestra itself.
Mhm.
And this might be better
That
suited for,
behemoth.
yeah, I was going to ask, this might be better suited for Derek at this point. But, this isn't a four-piece string quartet. This is, you
No.
know, this is 20 plus people that are going to be in the pit
Oh,
that's going to
let
be
me
a
give you
part
the
of this.
number.
Please.
43 instruments.
Okay.
Okay. And the coolest part, so I'm gonna give two shout outs here.
Mhm.
First to Derek, because gosh, that's a lot of coordination, right?
Yes.
I mean, you try patting your head and rubbing your belly at the same time. Now try doing that with 43 different appendages, right? It's
While
just
chewing gum
a
and
lot.
walking.
All right, it's a lot to keep track of. Um, one of the benefits that we didn't know till afterward, with uh, awarding the commission to Derek, is that he's also the artistic director of an LA local orchestra called A Bridge to Everywhere. And they do a lot of his music, obviously, but also they perform music from composers from all over the world. And so they have a very unique hub of professional musicians who play all over the world in all different traditions and all different instrumentations, not just your typical westernized orchestra. So in the orchestra itself, we have people who are fluent, I would say, in the musical vocabulary of many other cultures. And part of telling this story was to make sure that all of the sounds were authentic to what we have decided for our aesthetic purposes that we want to present on the world stage as Assyrian sounds. What are we most proud of? What pumps us up the most, right? So you're never, I mean, you've never heard a Zerna in another opera before, right? I'm pretty sure I can say that with like 100% truth.
I'd say not in
Zerna is
1,500
a,
years. You know.
yeah, this is a huge, huge difference, right? And a Zerna itself is an interesting instrument for those of you who don't know what it is. I jokingly but kind of serious say it's like those horns they blow at football matches, soccer games, right? Um, and when you're playing a zurna, you can only play one makam or scale, as we call them in the Western world, at a time. So, like, you need to have 13 different zurna to play in 13 different tonal areas or makams or intervals. Um, and so, one of the things that Derek created to be able to bring that authentic sound into the opera house is he has created a digital zurna, which doesn't sound that impressive if you think it's just like a sound on a synthesizer, but it is a microtonal capable instrument that is all digital, played on a digital mouthpiece, so that you can get that the microtonal bend, you can feel the vibrato of the breath, and you can have those very human triggered effects. And the pitches are played on a typical looking piano keyboard that has been reprogrammed to have 24 tones instead of 12, and then you can bend with the mouthpiece in between. And so that instrument, in 50 years, if somebody else wants to produce this opera, the instructions for recreating that zurna that's going to be able to play in any key, any mode, in one opera house, also without busting the lights in the ceiling because it's so loud in real life. That creation of Derek's is part of the score and can be recreated. So he's, using this orchestra, which is humongous, not just to breathe life and like transport the audience to a different place and space and time, but really innovating to invite these sounds that have never had a home inside a concert hall into this space and to stay there permanently. I wouldn't be surprised if his next piece is Concerto for Zurna. It's such an incredible feat, and it sounds so authentically accurate. It's ridiculously impressive. But so, besides the Zurna, he's got all these other very traditional instruments like the dawula, I'm going to say them all wrong, the ney, a kanun, the saz, I'll let him go on and on and on, but things that you would not normally hear in an opera orchestra. And you know what? They fit in just great. It's just that nobody's tried it before, right? So it's pretty incredible. The orchestral experience in a live concert hall, similar to opera singing, right, is the difference between just listening to it on a CD in your car and experiencing it in real life is that all of those vibrations, the airwaves that are unique to these live instruments, they really invade your body. You can physically feel music in a concert hall, and you just can't get that just jamming in your car. So for the experience of hearing that wall of sound live, that alone is a great reason to come hang out at the opera for a couple hours.
Listen, Diana, you sit there and go, if it's in an opera where most people wouldn't think so. If you listen to my playlists of these very unique blends of genres, like yesterday I sent my
Mm-hmm.
friend a song that was a Sufi chant blended in with
Mm-hmm.
European metal, and it somehow
Okay,
worked.
cool, man.
So yeah, you're like, oh
Well,
yeah, this
and
is going to be
right,
opera and ancient instruments. Sure, it's going to work. We're going to make it happen.
why not? Yeah, yeah. And you know what? It's ancient. And Derek has a great word. it's not mine, it's his. It's not fusion, right? Fusion is taking two things and smushing them together. Sardines and grilled cheese, right? It may not work, but you can certainly mash them together. I don't know, maybe there's a sardine grilled cheese person out there, but
Somebody has to
what
be.
and somebody asked me, but what this is transcultural, and it's using the different voices of different sound worlds in partnership. And the sound that we are achieving here simply cannot be achieved if you pull everybody apart and we separate to just the ancient instruments or just the westernized orchestral instruments or just the electronics. Because yes, there are electronics in this opera. You're going to hear an 808 drop and you're going to be like, am I in a club? What is happening? And it's pretty amazing. It's incredible, and it's modern and ancient all at the same time. Derek's sound is best described with the word transcultural, right? It's not about smooshing things together. It's about creating something brand new by using the strengths of each outlet.
Well, I'm hoping this is going to be your Rigoletto.
Ugh,
And,
let's hope so. Let's hope so.
that, Diana, before I let you go, you are also the artistic director of, excuse me, of Lyric Opera of Orange County. So we have to make sure people understand some of your credentials
Yes,
as well.
please. Yes.
You know,
Right. Not just
and
an Assyrian, but
right. There's like, oh, here's this one lady that knows music, so we're just gonna make her do it,
yeah,
But you
yeah,
are a
yeah.
mezzo
I have
soprano, you are a professional, you are an award-winning, professional
oh,
opera
thank you, thank you,
director.
thank you.
So,
Yes,
well, we have
yes.
to put the
Um,
credentials in there so they don't think it's
it's
just
true.
some random
It's
lady
true.
writing stuff.
Right. And I always say, and because part of what I do with Lyric Opera of Orange County is not just producing works, but I have the privilege of giving a lot of young professionals their first jobs, right? That's a big priority is give people a chance to demonstrate what they can do. And so I often say, I would much rather see your art speak for itself than have you tell me how amazing it is. But I understand. We also want to make sure people feel invested and that it's going to be worth their time when they decide that they are going to take a chance on something with their precious time, right? So, um, this truly, I will wrap up by saying, I truly believe that this work, this opportunity that I've had through Nora and the Assyrian Arts Institute to meet and work with people like Eve Sada and Derek Sky. This has come at a very specific point in my career. I would not have been able to take this on even 10 years ago, right? It's about the 20 years of experience, experimentation, success, failure, and the culmination of all of those things to be able to put a beast like this together. I am very fortunate to have extremely capable and thoughtful collaborators on this project. And one of the things we hope this inspires in others is for those young artists out there who might hear Derek's music or see our beautiful costume design or just listen to the lyrics of our music, right? And say, oh, this is something I might want to do. It is worth investing my time, and I can build something out of this. I'm not just singing in the shower or in my student recital or whatever. I can make a career out of it, and that is something that is not necessarily and a career in the arts is not something that is held in high esteem by all members of society, but it certainly is possible. And it's very different than what you imagine it to be. But it's very much worthwhile. And it's a discipline that you only improve upon with time and you only keep learning. And if you ever think to yourself, man, I know everything now, then you should probably change careers because that's never going to happen. There's always something new.
Well, I'm going to leave you with this, and I'm going to run this as a parallel because there is a slight intersect, but it's not the same thing. musical
Fair.
theater and opera, there is, they run parallel and there are a couple of intersects. And,
And yep,
I'm
go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead. No, well,
No, I
you
was
were
just
going to
gonna
say
say,
something.
and it's if you try to define opera and musical theater as different things, um, you need to take into account the era, the decade, the time that each individual piece was written in,
Mhm.
and the technique, pedagogy, audience that it was meant for.
Mhm.
So they are different things, but more and more in the modern age, there is intersection and crossover and aspects of each discipline that are necessary within the other house, right? Whether you're on Broadway or in the opera house. So
And that,
you are not wrong.
okay,
There's a lot of parallel.
but that is what I'm kind of leading into, because we see so many shows, and I'm going to pick on the main ones that everybody does, so people don't sit there and
Please.
any theater house goes, he's targeting us. And no, because I've only been covering live theater for about yeah, April will be 2 years that I'll be covering live
Hey.
theater. You know, where we see West Side Story, and we see
Hmm.
Fiddler on the Roof all the time, and we see what's it, Sound of Music, and
Hmm.
just Grease and Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it's the same shows over and over and over again.
Yep.
In opera, it's kind of been the same thing for 500 years.
Hmm.
You know,
Right. Of
when something new comes along, and not, people are more hesitant to give something new a chance than something familiar. Why
course.
should more often than not people give something new a chance?
So many people that find out what I do for work, um, and then immediately say, "Oh, that's amazing. I don't really like opera." I always say, "Oh, what operas have you heard?" Because maybe they don't love that experimental 1950s 12-tone mathematic German opera. I don't want to say it out loud, but like, you know what? There's some opera I don't like either. Let's just leave it at that, right? Just like there's some musical theater I don't like either. But I have a hard time uh, believing that anybody would say, I only watch, I don't know, dramatic movies. I don't like comedy, right? Or I only like, it, there's lots of flavors out there, right? And so much of what's being created today with our contemporary artists is a fusion or a demonstration of all of the things in their current zeitgeist, right? And so I don't know if I'm going to explain this well at all, right? But what is the worst thing that can happen by listening to something new? Because at the very least, you're going to walk out of that theater going, wow, I always liked ABC and I always liked XYZ. And I had no idea that when I put them together, it's something totally new and it's even more incredible than just those things on their own, right? You might have a totally cathartic experience. Or you might walk out of there going, well, that was really cool, but I think I really like Mozart. I like structure. I like simplicity. I like, not that there's anything simple about just Mozart, but I don't know. I am married to a very adventurous eater. Let me put it that way. Right on our first date, he wanted to get cricket tacos. Um,
Yeah, that would have been our
wasn't
last,
for
but
me.
that's just me.
What I was gonna say, it wasn't for me. But you know what? What's the worst thing that can happen by trying something like that, right? I don't know. I'm not the person to ask because I think I might be willing to be more adventurous because I've had my preconceived notions dashed and proven wrong many, many, many times in my life. So I would just say be brave and try something new. What's the worst that can happen? Right?
So we'll oversimplify that and go start with Looney Tunes Kill the Wabbit, work your way
That
over to Gilgamesh the opera, March 28th and 29th at the Cerritos Center for the Performing Arts world premiere. Diana Farrell, thank you so much for chatting with me. Where can we find you?
thank you, Rob.
Lyric Opera and the Assyrian Arts Institute,
Yeah.
or yeah, the Assyrian Arts Institute on social
Yeah.
media.
Find first of all, go follow Gilgamesh. So it's Gilgamesh underscore the opera is our handle on Instagram and Facebook, and that's going to be one of the best places to get behind the scenes where you can meet the artists involved in creating and performing the production. You can see our process, you can get behind the scenes scoop, and I believe they drop some discount codes as well. And then beyond that, make sure you sign up, subscribe to newsletters from the Assyrian Arts Institute and lyricoperaoc.org. You'll get lots of kind of behind the scenes info and some personalized invitations. And as you prep, right, to come and celebrate with us, because it's just going to be a big party. We can't wait to share it with everybody.